The conversation on UFOs, UAPs, and non-human intelligence has long been shaped by experience, speculation, and secrecy. What's missing is a coherent approach, one that separates data from interpretation and evidence from belief. Humanity now stands at a threshold. Encountering a non-human reality is not only a scientific mystery, it's a civilizational challenge. We must move beyond ideology and secrecy toward a science of contact, grounded in evidence, methods, and shared human values. The Human Institute is building that foundation. The Investigating Non-Human Intelligence series is the first public multidisciplinary forum dedicated to developing the scientific and ethical foundations for researching our human encounter with non-human intelligence. The series convenes leading scientists, philosophers, and field investigators to explore new approaches, methods, and emerging data and findings to ultimately generate breakthrough discoveries in non-human intelligent phenomena. These one-hour presentations bring forward serious work by serious people, charting a roadmap for a new science capable of understanding and managing the unknown responsibly before it manages us. We invite scholars, experiencers, and all who seek clarity to join us. It's time to rise above speculation and take a deliberate step toward a grounded, evidence-based response to the existence of non-human intelligence.
Apologies, Reed, you are muted.
Testing 1, 2.
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. Welcome again. On behalf of UAP Med and the Human Institute, I want to thank you for joining us for this conversation and this broader series as we explore what may be a new science of non-human intelligence. We're here because a serious question is beginning to force itself into the public consciousness, into scientific discussion, as well as into the lives of ordinary people. Are we encountering phenomena that may reflect technologies and even intelligences that are not human? For a long time, questions like this have existed at the margins, fragmented by witness testimony, classified programs, cultural speculation, and isolated lines of research. But now that might be changing. What we may be beginning to see, or at least what many of us hope is now possible, is the early formation of a more serious and disciplined framework of inquiry, one that is capable of addressing these questions with greater rigor, better methods, and a wider range of human knowledge and expertise. Perhaps this is the beginning of a new kind of investigation for humanity, one that is willing to examine difficult data, one that can apply scientific discipline without using or relying upon old assumptions to explain away what has not yet been adequately understood, and one that is capable of asking not only whether something is unusual and present, but what kinds of intelligence, intention, interaction, and consequence may be involved. And that is part of the purpose of this series. So far in this series, we have had very important seminal lectures by Dr. Michael Safone, framing out what this new science of non-human intelligence may entail. Dr. Gary Nolan, exploring the research roadmaps for investigating non-human intelligence. Dr. Beatrice Villarreal, discussing the search for technosignatures in Earth's atmosphere and near space environment. Dr. Massimo Teodorani, discussing interactive plasma phenomena as a potential new form of NHI. And then finally today, Julia Mossbridge is with us for a conversation about consciousness and non-human intelligence. The Investigating NHI series is intended as a public forum for careful multidisciplinary inquiry into a problem that really does demand more than one field can provide on its own. If such phenomena are real in any meaningful sense, then understanding them will require contributions from across the sciences and the humanities. And as we begin to explore that, I'll put this on screen. We will be bringing in speakers from a variety of disciplines, from AI and machine learning, biology, cognitive sciences, cybernetics, evolutionary biology, neuroscience, philosophy, law, policy, and governance, and so many more fields that have an important contribution to make, really gathering the best minds and the best approaches and methods from our broader human knowledge base to tackle the question and the potential challenge that NHI might present. Maybe getting to a period in which old categories and old assumptions within the scientific community are no longer sufficient to break through in our understanding of emergent, anomalous, unidentified, intelligent phenomena. And so this series is really not about presenting final conclusions or findings or even making claims. It's really about building better questions, engaging the data we have, and articulating hypotheses that strike at the heart of what this interaction at a relational level between humanity and a potential NHI may ultimately be. We'll be asking, as we have so far, what counts as evidence? What patterns might indicate intelligence or intentful behavior? And how do we examine forms of interaction that do not fit conventional human modes of communication, embodiment, or agency? And ultimately, how do we respond ethically and responsibly to this phenomenon in the human interest? Not easy questions, but very necessary ones. And so it's my pleasure today to open up the series again, and I'll turn the microphone over to Chuck Schreiner, the coordinator of Investigating NHI, as he takes us further.
Thank you, Reed. Well, so can we put that slide back on up for just a second? So think about this. First of all, this is a new science. You know, if we assume that NHI are here, and I do, I mean, that there's just a preponderance of evidence, then look at the breadth and the scope of what this is. This impacts all of humanity. I mean, you know, and to understand what, you know, because these are not, we're farther apart from these than we are from a jellyfish. You know, we don't know what the nature of what NHI are and what their intention is or anything. And so throughout all of these domains, we have to begin. And it's really, if I were 45, I would absolutely jump into this idea of new science, because we're going to completely begin to rethink how we study. I mean, the whole nature of understanding, the nature of communication, the nature of analysis, the whole scope and panorama of what this means to us. And we start from where we are today, where there is, you know, sort of a developmentally a hurdle in a lot of the researchers and science and organizations to even embracing this, because there's stigma and there's, you know, it doesn't make common sense to us. And how in the heck could these beings have arrived here, and whatever it is. But nonetheless, you know, I mean, as soon as we see, you know, an alien body on television, you know, the dam is going to break. And so this is where it's going to go. We are going, I mean, inevitably, we will develop this new science of NHI. And our speakers that we've had, and now Julia, these are the pioneers who are beginning to define the frameworks and the scope and the nature of this kind of research. It's really exciting stuff to me. I mean, this is humanity on the brink of something that is, it's just a crack in the cosmic egg. It's a complete shift in our understanding of humanity's place in the universe and among ourselves. So as we talk today, you know, I hope and I think that where this conversation will go, it will orient towards this new science, and we'll think about frameworks and structures and methodologies and just the meaning of it. What does that mean to develop a new science in this context, in the context of where we are in 2026 with all kinds of stigma and you know, old assumptions? And it's really a developmental issue. Humanity, what triggers development is often stress. This, the advent of NHI in our atmosphere, whether they're benign, beneficent, or dangerous, that is stress. That changes our reality. And so it's going to birth this new science. So it's an exciting time. It's a completely disorienting time. And today's conversation, I think, will just be really brilliant as we put our heads around what this is. So I think that's it. Back to you, Reed.
Hi. Thank you, everybody. I'd like to introduce our speaker today. Dr. Julia Mossbridge is an American cognitive neuroscientist, author, and educator who works on understanding and training exceptional human performance, including side effects, notably on precognition and presentiment. She's a senior distinguished fellow in human potential at the Center for the Future of AI, Mind, and Society at Florida Atlantic University. She's a member of the Loomis Innovation Council at the Nonpartisan Stimson Center, an affiliate professor in the Department of Biophysics and Physics at the University of San Diego, and the co-founder and founding executive director of the nonprofit, the Institute for Love and Time. Recently, she is the author of Have a Nice Disclosure. So welcome, Julia. We're very happy that you could be here with us today.
Thanks for that wonderful introduction, and thanks for having me. I'm excited, except I'm a little concerned about the being a serious person part. We'll work on it.
Well, we may have to step back from our sobriety to expand the lens, to take in a little bit more of the underlayment of information under the space-time reality, which is something you talk about, Julia. So I think this is a great exploration. I'm very much looking forward to it. I just want to also mention to those viewing, please queue up your questions over at slido.com/NHI3, and we will have time for questions as we go. And so with that, can't wait to get started. Ted, I believe you have a question for Julia about her work.
Sure. Julia, can you tell us about your work, how it is fundamentally related to understanding consciousness, and why that might be important to understanding exposures to UAP and non-human intelligence?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's not fundamentally related to understanding consciousness. I really don't know. So my work, sorry to start off that way, but my work is, it may be fundamentally related to understanding consciousness. I'm sort of placing a bet on that. I feel like it is, but I could be wrong. My work is really about at the high level because I'm interested in so many areas, right? I'm interested in unconditional love. I'm interested in the physics of love. I'm interested in time in both the physical world and the psychological world and the spiritual world. I'm interested in extraordinary, or what are called extraordinary human experiences that I think are quite ordinary, actually, common among humans. And I'm interested in the relationship with NHI and UAP. So I guess if I had to put an umbrella around all of it, I would say I'm interested in what is going on of being a person.
Mm-hmm.
What is going on at the deepest level? What is going on with how we are conscious, how we are unconscious? I think that unconsciousness is not talked about, but is really interesting. A lot of stuff goes on when we're unconscious that we don't talk about. What is going on with our motivations? What is going on with the idea recently of disclosure, and how what is going on with this idea of ontological shock? What is going on with how we are with each other and how we are in terms of the human problem, which I call having a difficult time knowing how to be with ourselves and others in a sort of a harmonious way, a problem that many other animal species have solved, even if they kill each other or kill other animals. They have a harmony about it that seems like it works for them. We don't have that. Why is that? So so my work is sort of about following those questions where they lead, and if those questions have to do with consciousness and NHI, then okay, great.
That clarifies it a bit. Reed, did you have a question that you wanted to bring?
Yeah, well, Julia, I am not an expert in your work. I'm becoming one. I've enjoyed watching your presentations and reading some of your papers. I just watched your talk at the SCU conference from 2 years ago. this morning, actually, on my walk around the neighborhood. And I found it an expansive, eye-opening, mind-opening kind of new panorama for what the interaction between intelligences may be. And so I wanted to kind of step into this topic or concept that you discuss of pre-sentiment. I think there's a more official name for it, which you can provide for us.
Predictive anticipatory activity.
Right, PAA, good. So, and kind of for those who are not aware of this new field or just the field of cognitive neuroscience in general, I think the exciting thing here is as we begin to entertain the possibility of engaging with a layer beyond our own, whether it's in space, time, with off-planet intelligences, on-planet intelligences, this concept that we are fundamentally operating in a non-local consciousness that's able to access an informational substrate underlying it all could be a capability, it could be a risk, it could be many things as we consider engaging with NHI. So walk us through pre-sentiment and how it might connect to concepts of non-human intelligence.
So real quick, pre-sentiment is a form of precognition. So what is precognition? Precognition is the ability to receive information about future events, whether you're conscious or not conscious of it, that accurately reflects the future events. And these events are not events that you could have predicted otherwise using other means. Like, it's not precognition to know that it's Thursday today, that tomorrow you might be excited because it's the end of the week. That's something that you could have remembered from your own nature and how your history has gone. So it's also not something that you caused. So if you dream of a ham sandwich and then you make yourself a ham sandwich, it's not really precognition because you had control over the thing that you dreamt about and you could make it happen. So precognition is the ability to perceive future events, information about future events, consciously or unconsciously, in a way that is accurate, that you don't have from memory or from your senses, your five senses, and that you don't control, you don't cause. Presentiment is a subset of precognition that is the physiological changes in your body that occur before an event. You can be aware of them. Some people are aware of them. There's studies about traders in London, day traders. There's two really interesting studies about the gifted day traders being the ones who have awareness of their own heart rhythms. So their interoception, their capacity to know what's going on in their body physiologically, is high. And so that potentially tells them, invest in this, don't sell this, don't sell that, right? So that could be a form of presentiment, but it's a physiological change that gives you that precognitive information. Most people have it. So you could take a room full of people and you could test them in a simple presentiment test. And even the ones who say they don't believe in it and don't know what you're talking about or don't understand it, on average, they're going to have some aspects of it. So what does it look like when you test it? What it looks like is you have a pre-selected pool of stimuli, which are usually photos or videos or sounds, something that can either be arousing, like a photo of someone with a gun. I don't mean arousing sexually, although those experiments have been done. They're more fun than the experiments I did in graduate school and as a postdoc. And then the other kind would be just a mellow, a neutral experiment, like, neutral stimulus, like a picture of a pair of shoes on the floor or a sunset. And so what you would do is record someone's physiology, whatever the target is. And the target could be anything from respiration, temperature, gut motility, skin conductance, heartbeat, heart rate. And what you're doing is you're just recording that as an experimenter while the person is having these stimuli. And then later you go through and you look before the stimulus happens. And you have two classes of stimuli. You have these arousing stimuli, as I mentioned, and the neutral stimuli. You separate out the classes and you see if there's a statistical difference between the physiology that occurred before the arousing stimuli versus the neutral stimuli. That's the basic experiment. What does it have to do with this? Well, it suggests, we already know that space and that we live in a non-local universe. So we just know that. And look who the Nobel Prize went to in physics a couple of years back, the folks who demonstrated we live in a non-local universe. So people are slow and it takes us a long time to sort of adjust to the fact that we live in a non-local universe. But one of the implications is that the past and the future could store information that could potentially be accessible in either direction.
Mhm.
Just like different areas in space can be entangled.
Mhm.
So that's what it has to do with this, I think.
Fantastic. We're going to dive deeper into that aspect of potential entanglement, not just with information, but with other potential forms of intelligence. And I look forward to that. I think we want to just touch briefly on, what are your thoughts on the current state of cognitive neuroscience, consciousness studies, its ability to entertain such possibilities? Are you way out there in the forefront in still endeavoring without a lot of support from the mainline scientific community, or is this where it is already moving toward in the mainstream?
I think both are true. I
Okay.
think I've always been sort of a signal fish. I'm always perfectly willing to be out in front and kind of look around for interesting things, and not so concerned about whether people thought I was nuts. I think part of it is I grew up in this household where there was a lot of mental illness, and I really know what mental illness looks like, and I know that that's not me, and so it's very helpful actually to be like, well, I'm not that. So it's also hard in other ways, but in any case, it's a characteristic of mine, and I can't take credit for it, that I will just go look at what I'm interested in and try to get people excited about it so that I can get funding to do it. So the real question becomes the funding. So I ended up leaving one foot in academia, but I had a visiting scholar position at Northwestern, and putting the other foot in industry / software / research projects, paid research project production, boutique consulting. And that's where I still stay.
Mhm.
Like in that bio, you heard about University of San Diego, you heard about the Loomis Council, you heard about Florida Atlantic University. These are all sort of honorific titles. None of them give me money,
Mhm.
but I could say like, hey, is someone there want to collaborate, or can I use the library, stuff like that. So it's important to have that kind of a home so that you can still get academic work done. If you're me, I guess, or someone who's trying to do this, but it has been. I just look towards the future. Like in the future, this won't be a problem. Right now, it is. We're not there yet. We'll get there. It's okay. People are
Yeah.
slow.
As we begin to frame out this new science, I'm curious, what is the nature of the pushback that you've experienced? And I know you don't want to focus on that. You want to focus on where you need to go. And I totally love that. I love that ethos. I'm just curious, like, what is the nature of the pushback? What would be your response to it? What's that kind of like, that bleeding edge between where you are and want to go, where the rest of it all is, and what might transition them over the fence line?
Converting other people is impossible. I would advise against it. People will come in their own time. I've been asked so many times what could get other people to convert. They will have an experience, whether it's listening to telepathy tapes and starting to think, wait a minute, there's something going on here, or having a dream about someone who's not ill but ends up dying and suddenly, and that's the night before, and they haven't dreamt about them in years. These are the kinds of things that make people say, okay, there's something going on that I don't understand. And it's a humbling experience, and it's an awesome, awe-inspiring experience. And that's what gets people over the hump. In terms of how I push back, I just keep doing science and going forward and try to make good teams of scientists who can answer questions and talk about it openly. At one point, so here's two examples of the nature of the pushback. When I was at Northwestern, had a visiting scholar position, I was, periodically consulting with, because the thing is, if your mind is useful to people, they also kind of want you around because they're going to ask you questions about technology or whatever. I happen to be particularly good at machine learning stuff. And so it's like, oh, you're handy. And so there was a group of people in Northwestern faculty who were friends of mine, and they wanted me to keep my visiting scholar position, which did not pay, but it was it was honorific. And there was a group of people who were concerned that it would reflect poorly on them.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so I heard from the people who were my friends that they had 3 faculty meetings about me, which bummed me out, because compare that to the one faculty meeting they had about the professor who was a pedophile. So I feel like I was worse than the pedophile.
Right.
And so it's just like, oh my gosh. So that is the kind of pushback that happens. And then what they ended up deciding is I could keep my visiting scholar position, but I couldn't tell anybody. And I was like, you guys, I'm all about, like, I'm literally out in the world. All I do is speak to mainstream audiences about the importance of this stuff and the science of this stuff. I'm not going to stop doing that. I'm not an in the closet person. So bye.
Yeah.
So that's
Well-
one example. And then the other example is just the fact that if you ask the question, people think you're a believer and they can dismiss the answer in academia. So anyone who asks these questions can be considered a believer, which is a risk.
Well, and if you want to learn more about taboo, Julia has a phenomenal presentation from the Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies. You talk about ridicule, shame, status, and denial, the 4 pillars of taboo. And you've obviously experienced it firsthand. So thank you for your courage and your pioneering spirit, Julia. We all benefit from it. We're going to plow deeper in now. And before Chuck asks the next question, I just want to remind viewers, please queue up your questions for Julia. We look forward to seeing what you would like to ask, and we will bring that into the conversation. Over to you, Chuck.
Well, first of all, I probably shouldn't say this, but you're my new hero. So there you go. It's done. I'm serious. I just have so much love for that. Just awesome. Anyway, so you used a term, the physics of love, earlier. Yeah, it's just an extraordinary term. And on your LinkedIn page, the science and tech for hope and unconditional love and future preparedness. These are powerful ideas. So I'm just curious, I mean, I think that definition of love is expansive and profound. And so how did you come to this? And what does it mean? And just kind of lay out the fundamentals of what you've been thinking about around this and what you've been understanding and experiencing. I mean, this is because if this is a developmental process, which is how I look at it, the whole encounter with NHI, this is, recognizing what interconnectivity is and isn't, and getting rid of myths and finding what the substantive stuff is, because we're encountering NHI and we don't know what they are, and we can't just project and hope or dread. We have to really understand the actuality of them. And so I think your work kind of goes in that direction, helping us understand foundationally how to look at all this. So the physics of love.
Well, that is a high compliment. Thank you.
Oh, meant it.
Thank you. The physics of love, how did I come to that? What is it? What am I talking about? What does it have to do with NHI? So how did I come to it? So I didn't come to a physics of love. I came to the question that there ought to be a physics of love. And I had some ideas about how to start, but it's sort of like framing the question rather than answering it. I was just talking to Gary Nolan about the importance of framing the big questions and maybe not answering them. And that's really key. So how did I come to that need? Good Lord. I mean, who knows? I could tell a story. Here's the story I'll tell. It must have been experiential. It must have been that I kept having this experience that whenever I asked to have an experience of unconditional love, I would be given that experience without any time delay. So that told me that unconditional love is this human response to an instantaneous, like, physical force. And I started to think of universal love as the name for the physical force of love, like a foundational force that creates and is creating everything. It is also moving through everything, both that's matter and non-matter, like all of it, sort of like outside of space-time, foundational to space-time and matter, but also beyond it. And then what is that universal love? What does that even mean? Like, if you're going to try to define your terms. So then I'm like, well, we don't have a name in English for that which connects, right? We have bridges and we have glue and we have a handshake and we have, a nail and a board. Those are all examples of things that connect, but we don't have a word that means that which connects. So I just wonder if that's love. I wonder if that's the universal force of love. It's so basic. It's like the water we swim in that we don't even acknowledge it as a thing. And so if let's just take the idea that universal love is a physical force like electricity or electromagnetism or something, or gravity, right? The connection doesn't have to be positive. Like with magnetism, you can repel, right? But there's a connection between the two things that are magnetic, right? The connection has a sign, but that hardly matters. There's this relationship. And so creating a physics of relationship, of connection, is something that this guy named Dick Schaup, Schoup, did. He started with just relationship, and then he got to like quantum mechanics. And I think it was brilliant. I knew him. I think he also showed up in one of my talks after he died. That was the only time I've ever had that experience where someone physically shows up. I swear to God, it was him. So I don't know what to say about that except for that experience happened. And it made me start thinking about the physics of love and why do we think that we're not built of the physics of love? Now, when it comes to NHI, I think the big barrier that we have with NHI is that okay, so first of all, we assume their bodies are different from ours. Just like we assume like a person who lives in another country, like a person who lives in Africa isn't white. Like I'm white, person who lives in Africa is dark skin. Their body is different from mine. So then we assume a lot of other things are different. Like there's just that basic assumption of difference based on the body, right? It's a decent assumption. But any sufficiently intelligent group of beings would have figured out that consciousness or unconsciousness or the combined mind, let's just call it the mental space, is something that is shared. It is something that is not local. It is something that is not material. It is something that is connective, and it is interdependent. And so what do we even mean when we talk about NHI as bodies? Because like I keep coming back to, here's my little astronaut doll sitting here for a prop. I keep coming back to my astronaut doll. Like why this could be NHI, right? Couldn't this have consciousness in the sense that it's like a radio tower that intersects consciousness? I don't know. We don't know how consciousness works. I certainly don't. I'm a cognitive neuroscientist. I've been studying it for 30 years. I don't know how consciousness works. I think this doll could be conscious in the sense that it could share in some kind of mental experience. And I think that there could be beings who have figured out how to essentially put consciousness into things that we would consider inanimate. And so I think our old ideas and our kind of primitive ideas about what it means to be a being and what it means to be a body and what it means to be an intelligence are changing, at least starting to change just because of artificial intelligence, and it will continue to change from there. It's almost like artificial intelligence is training us to see things differently.
Fascinating stuff. And we're going to get more into this kind of relational potential engagement that might be taking place. And Julia, I just want to back up a little bit because I think, your experience and story, people are really curious about. So you physically saw someone who is no longer alive. And now before we just,
I did.
Oh, yeah. And I think this is apropos because in consciousness-based interactions with alleged NHI, people report seeing something physically that others may not perceive, that may not be physically there per se, but the consciousness of it may be interacting with them right there in the local environment. So I'm curious about your experience, and then we'll get into more of the NHI side.
Just briefly about that. I mean, this is the first time I mentioned it. It just came out of my mouth. But, he sort of walked towards me. And the weirdest thing was, and I now realize how typical this is of NHI interactions, is as I say it. I had the experience of, I can't remember his name. He's coming towards me. And I can't talk to him. Like I won't, I know that I shouldn't talk to him. I know I shouldn't acknowledge him. I know, and I can't remember his name. And I just sort of see him and I'm like, and he's like approaching me and he's looking at me intently like, and then he goes and sits down. So it is that kind of feeling of mind control, but it's almost like I agree.
Mhm.
Like, I agree it would be a bad idea to mention your name because I kind of don't think you could be here because you're dead. And so it would be pretty weird if I said hi to you because maybe other people aren't seeing anything,
Mhm.
right? And I also have this form of facial blindness where I hardly ever have the capacity to recognize someone unless I met them in person before. Now, him, I had met in person. So, but it's possible it was some other guy who looked like him, reminded me of him, and I had that experience and it wasn't him. So I'm willing
Mm.
for it to be any combination of those. I don't have to insist on the ontological reality of it, but the effect the experience had on me, and part of being a cognitive neuroscientist is you're studying the mind and its relationship to the brain, and the mind is non-physical. So experience really matters. So the
Mhm.
effect the experience had on me was for me to start thinking about the physics of love. So whether it was some guy who looked like him that I mistook and had this experience with, or an NHI or his spirit, or I don't know. And I don't care because the impact was this other impact that feels powerful.
Mhm. And so the questions arise, is it possible that we can interact with an entity that is at a distance, that is not physically adjacent to us across space-time? Can we interact across time itself, and then potentially interact with something or an entity that is not physically embodied, that is no longer, quote, alive, but is still alive? So these are the pregnant kind of questions I'd love to get into, and I want to bring Ted up on stage. Ted, you, UAP Med, are forerunners in investigating the UAP exposures that people are reporting and some of the consciousness-based experiences. And so please take us deeper into that with Julia.
Well, certainly. We have a body of experience. People are coming forward and saying that they're having exposures to things that others aren't experiencing. Often in UAP cases that involve occupants, we see claims of telepathy. We get presentiment from people who have a feeling that something's going to happen, and they know it's going to involve UAP, and then they get an impression to go outside, look up, and there it is. So it's very strong in the literature that these things are going on. And I found myself a little bit triggered, Julia, in your discussions of love and as a sort of a universal cosmological component, because I have a lot of background in Buddhist training, and that deals very directly with the ideas that you're talking about here. And I'm wondering if you see any corollaries in that are worth looking into, and how all of that comes back to our people with exposures, our people that are having these encounters. They feel like they're under psychic surveillance, and so on. So feel free, just take a run at any of that.
Wait a minute. When you said you were triggered, usually that means in a negative way. I don't understand the negative impact of it, but I want to understand.
Okay, so I use the term triggered, but I wasn't referring to a negative impact. A response, a reaction.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It made you think of Buddhism and the sort of the depth of Buddhism.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
The teaching there, both in Buddhism and in Hindu Vedic training, the Patanjali texts. I know Russell Targ has spent some time working with those ideas as well. So the idea of a dharma, the dharma being the overarching everything that's all connected, and that time is past, present, future, and what they call rigba, which is all of it at the same time.
Yeah, the Egyptian notions of time are very similar. So are some Iroquois notions of time. I'm not an anthropologist, so those are like really cursory looks at those things that I've heard about from people. Yeah, I guess I don't totally understand I mean, I guess I sort of think, of course, in Buddhism, any mystical tradition where you're focusing on your experience, you will notice that there's information about space and times that aren't with you right now. That will come up. And it's, for thousands of years, Tibetan Buddhists talk about it too, and Native Americans talk about it. I mean, it's just, and modern day meditators, if you start noticing how your mind works, you start to realize that it doesn't work in this linear fashion, period. And if you start noticing how your mind works in relationship, like Reed was just talking about, and that you were alluding to, relationships across time and space, and to feeling of being pulled or compelled, or just kind of knowing, a feeling of knowing. They're all connective. Those are all connective experiences. Showing us, it's my husband, who is a Advaita, he's into Advaita, so like everyone has their tradition, right? All of them are wrong and all of them are right, right? In the sense that all of them try to like define all the terms and all this stuff, and all of them, and that's always wrong because it's just a model, and models are always wrong. And then all of them are right because they come down to this essence of, there is this life force, or there is this God, or there is this love that is real, and it's like the realest thing. And everything else is sort of commentary on top of it. And if we think, and so anyway, the reason I brought up my husband is he calls those experiences where you're compelled, or or you feel something that feels it's so connective and relational in a way that we don't understand. He calls them free samples. I love that term because it's like, we as academics, as people who take themselves seriously with all their serious work, we're supposed to want to figure it all out. And sometimes we're drawn to the intellectual traditions that say we've figured it all out. There's 7 kinds of dharma, da 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 da. And it's like, a free sample shows you not only that it's not figure outable, but that figuring it out intellectually is the booby prize. The actual prize, and I don't know if you guys know the term booby prize, it's an old-fashioned term. I'm old, but it's the prize that you give to the person at the fair because they didn't win they didn't win the big bear. They didn't win the big prize. The actual big prize is love. So the actual prize is not the understanding and the intellectual and all that stuff. It's just love. It's just accessing universal love, accessing that force that is there. That's the prize. All the rest is like little notes about this and that and the other thing, including all this concern about ontological shock, which is just an intellectual egoic response to, oh no, we didn't understand how things were. Well, like, why did you think you understood how things were?
Yeah. My father was a spiritual teacher, and something he was legendary for saying on stage is, understanding is for dummies, right? The moment you think you understand and you've boxed in reality is the moment you're disconnected and you're no longer experiencing it. And to your points, Julia, in other talks you've given, this systems one thinking, this intuitive, fast, accurate means by which we ascertain existing reality, extant forces, right? And understanding is just systems two thinking, and that can short circuit the system. So
it's a story and it's always wrong.
Yeah. So this is so fascinating. I want to get to Ted's. I think the fundamental question here, Ted, just to kind of get us into the NHI topic, is in these UAP exposures, when people are reporting precognitive events of being compelled to look up, and then they look exactly in the night sky where it is. Pilots reporting that the UAP appeared at their cap point, their point of rendezvous with other aircraft. This ability potentially to engage the mind across distance and maybe time. Julia, in your work and in your time on the UAP topic, what do you think is going on? Like, what are the aspects of this engagement that's taking place, the potential mechanisms for it?
I don't think the mechanisms are going to be understandable by us. So I'm not sure it's worth talking about. But the experiences are free samples. Mm-hmm. We are being shown, the cap point one I especially love. Mm-hmm. We are being shown that time is more like a room and less like a line. And you can move about in the room. We are being shown that our consciousness is shared. Mm-hmm. We are being shown that we are not necessarily under attack unless we decide that we're under attack and start shooting. We are being shown that we aren't in control of our minds. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, that's a scary one for people because the ego wants to claim control.
Yeah.
But
You know,
we're being shown all that.
Julia, I agree with pretty much all of that, and I think a lot of this goes back to your initial observation that we live in a non-local universe and understanding just how pervasive that is. It has everything to do with, coherence in molecules and in like proteins in our body, and how they have duration and then how they cease, and all the way out to the way thought moves. It seems like there's a common mechanism in all of this, and I think your point that it's a non-local universe is really important. I used to sit up nights trying to figure out how the UFOs would find me. I didn't, because it didn't make sense that I had some hard technology in me that and I kind of stuck to that idea that wasn't really the answer, and it turns out it doesn't seem to be the answer at all. It's much more subtle than that.
Yeah, if you can read the informational substrate of the universe, then you can find anyone at any time, right? And so, and what I used to tell when I was teaching remote viewing, what I used to tell my students is like, imagine every target, which is the thing you're trying to, the question you're trying to answer, is like a marble, and all the targets in the universe are in this bowl. Now, how are you gonna? They're not sorted by like, here's a topic that starts with the letter A for aardvark, and here's a topic that starts with the letter B for balloon. They're sorted by intention. So all you need to do is recognize, you don't have to figure out how to do it, but you have to recognize that you take your intention and you take your love and you use that to find exactly the right target, pull it out of the bowl, describe it, and put it back in. And that's the same thing with UAP contact, I believe. I mean, I figure everyone's doing the same thing. I mean, anyone who understands that it's a non-local universe, including you, right? That's the tricky thing about it. It's not just a non-local universe out there. Also this, right? If there's a non-local universe, then the tricky thing is to recognize, oh, intention, love, these things that we consider non-material end up running that non-local universe.
And we're going to get much more into this this topic of information, because I think that's central to this, tapping into the informational substrate. Can we receive information, as many do claim in their encounters allegedly with NHI? Can information be unknowingly transmitted, maybe against one's will? If you don't want to release information, are you already doing it? Can it already be received? I'd like to turn to a question in Slido. So let's bring that up. A question from Ben. Some people have reported encounters with NHI that could override their consciousness or free will, plant thoughts in their minds, etc. Do we have any analogies for that in the normal human experience that we could study to prepare us for these kinds of encounters?
Sure. Being a mother. So oftentimes I felt when I had an infant who was nursing in the middle of the night, against my will, I went to that child because I was so exhausted. But that child had control over my mind. There's no question. And I think every mother who cares for their child feels that way. There could be times when you're like it still happens now, and he's 26. He'll call and I'll answer the phone even though I don't have time to talk because I'm compelled. He's my kid, so I think that's a common experience, and we also do that for anyone that we care about and are related to. And then sometimes we get mad at them for it. Like we get mad at our romantic partners by how important they are to us or how much they mean to us, and we feel dependent on them, like our mind is being controlled by this relationship. And it can be an abusive relationship, in which case that's bad. It could be a loving relationship, in which case them's the shakes. That's what happens in a loving relationship. You start to become this single entity. So it's all ego. If your ego, if you think that your ego is in charge of your mind, that's the mistake. If you think that you had any control of your mind in the first place, as here you is your ego. If you think your ego had any control of your mind in the first place, that's the mistake. And so I get that it can sound horrible to think that someone else has control of your mind. But Someone else always has control of your mind. I mean, your entire circumstances have control of your mind. What you had for breakfast has control of your mind.
Right.
This
right.
picture behind me, see, has control of my mind. I feel compelled to be cheerful. The informational substrate has control of your mind. Your mind is not your own. Your mind is something that you're experiencing.
That's profound. That's a profound acknowledgement. I mean, this acknowledgement, this illusion of self-control that we possess and hold on to, and the way that stigma is used to reinforce this, non-real control mechanism that we think we have over ourselves or the universe. I think we have to step into this new arena and understand this bidirectional transmission of whatever it is, of self, of information, etc. And we're going to get in later in this conversation to your concepts around cognitive infrastructure, securing the cognitive infrastructure. And I think for practical reasons, and maybe the questioner is wondering, how do I secure my mind if I do not want to engage or be engaged? But that goes down to the human level as well. And you can find great talks by psychiatrists, psychologists, clinical therapists on how to create healthy boundaries in relationship, etc. And I think that those are analogous to the potential interaction with NHI. I want to get your take, Julia, on. Oh, go ahead, Ted.
Well, I had a question also in about this informational substrate. Yeah, is it possible to intentionally be deceitful with it? My experience, around psi function, that truth and honesty is what moves the information intent, and will, and not really false information. Do you have a perspective on that, Julia?
Well, it's like a funny question. It's like, I love the question. I agree with you. I have that same experience. I think information can be used for evil, but information that's true is just true. So here's my allegory, the allegory of the sock puppet. So it's like the sock puppet turns to me and says, do you think I can be deceitful with the hand? Now, who is saying that? Who is controlling the sock? The hand is controlling the sock. And then the sock is asking, can I be deceitful with the hand? It's just a misunderstanding of, if the informational substrate holds everything that is inside and outside of space-time, from the beginning to the end of the universe, that includes every thought that you think. So if you're being deceitful with it, it also created that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I think of the, if I may digress to pop culture, the three-body problem, the idea of a sophon, a nanocomputer placed on Earth by a non-human intelligence capable of perceiving or even preconsciously perceiving every thought of every living human all at once, real time. And, which is just maybe to say that there is an informational substrate. Maybe there are entities that are much more capable or ontologically prepared to be capable to access it for whatever ends.
Well, I mean, that's what they're saying when they go to the cat point. That's what they're saying when every single abduction experience has telepathy in it. I mean, that's literally the message every time. Yeah. It's like, we can access this. You guys are going to be able to access this too. Look, you can. We're doing telepathy with you right now. Doesn't mean that you can't, right? Clearly you can. So it seems pretty obvious.
The thing I think about as I listen to you, Julia, is that to develop that kind of openness that you're describing, where you're not in control, that takes an enormous amount of, I call it faith. As we deal with anxiety, there's lots of sources of anxiety as a human being, existential and psychological and blah, 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 all this stuff. That part of the practice, I haven't looked at what your practices are, but part of the practice that I understand is learning how to develop faith, how to encounter anxiety and fear, how to not be in control and yet be absolutely fine. But this is developmentally, I mean, this is a challenge to accomplish after 50 years of working on it, still working on it.
I mean, it's sort of easy too, because it's not like you're in control of it.
Yeah, right.
So the developmental process itself, you're not in control of. And so
right,
it's easy in the sense of, like, a cloud went by and you were like, oh, it's cloudy. Well, that was easy. I didn't have to make the cloud or push it through the sky. You know what I mean? And so So I think the way to get there, if people are curious about if they want to try to experience this, the best thing, it is faith. I like that. The best thing you can do is if you believe in God or believe in something that you can pray to, is to pray. If you don't believe in that, you can use intention. It's the same thing, right? So you could I believe it. I have this experience of God. I hate the term belief because I just have an experience that God is real, and that doesn't feel like a belief. It feels just like a relationship. So I just pray in a situation where I'm afraid. You know, I'll say things like, you know, God's wisdom, God's love, God's goodness, God's strength, God's grace, God's will. Just please be with me. And in an instant, every time.
Right.
I mean, every time.
And I just want to go ahead, Chuck.
Well, if your mind can flow into that zone, it's right there. You know, faith for me isn't like it isn't for an object or a thing. It is a state of being.
Yes. If that, you know what the key phrase is, if you can, just like you just said.
Right.
If you can.
But I can't control that. I don't manipulate that.
Yeah, exactly. If you can. And then you can let it go because maybe you can't.
But it happens. It happens nonetheless.
That's grace.
Yeah, right. Well, it's also, you know, just in this exchange, there's a hint of that going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also just want to call out, you know, for some, they may hear some of these words and think, okay, this is kind of soft or woo or what have you. Julia, in your work, what I appreciate is there's kind of there's a functional, operational embracement of these states of what you call unconditional love as protective, as a means by which to secure your psychic or psychological sovereignty in a universe in which the information is everywhere. It's coming in and out. You're like a fish in the sea. You're breathing in the water through your gills. You can't stop that from happening. So what do you then do? Do you get fearful? Do you get defensive? Or do you embrace, you might call it a higher substrate above the informational layer that secures your position in the midstream?
Maybe. I mean, I think what you're talking about is that it's basically psychologically healthy to have boundaries. It's psychologically healthy to feel like you're not completely at the mercy of the rest of the universe. And so the way I interpret that is it's psychologically healthy. It's interesting that I said psychically. It's psychologically healthy, maybe psychically healthy, to recognize that you're part of the universe. So when I say things like, you know, the informational substrate is controlling you, you're not separate from the informational substrate, by the way. So you have a percentage of control in the sense that every aspect of the universe has a percentage of the control. And so if you're wanting boundaries and that's feeling healthy to you, and I think it is healthy, then you're wanting boundaries because the informational substrate is saying, hey, you should have some boundaries. And that's a great impulse. You know, that's a great impulse.
What would be your response to someone asking, well, okay, so what does this mean with NHI? I mean, if NHI is accessing my consciousness there, and I can't access theirs because I'm not willing to, I'm afraid to, I'm unwilling to, what have you. How do I navigate this interaction or this relationship?
Well, if you want to control it, you're in trouble because you will suffer. So if you think about suffering as thinking that something that's happening shouldn't be happening, then you will suffer. That doesn't mean that suffering and pain aren't the same thing, right? So pain is saying this experience is unpleasant. I do not like this experience. This is a scary experience, or this hurts me. Those things are very real, and they can happen too with NHI. And I think there's a lot of taboo around talking about that. And sometimes there's taboo about talking about the good things. Both of those things kind of dance in our minds and in our communities. But so I feel like the way to manage it, if it's happening, is to acknowledge that it's happening, just like anything. Like if you fall down and hit your knee, you know, part of you could be like, oh, I wish I didn't do that. I was about to go to work, or I was about to give this talk, or whatever it is. And then another part could be like, all right, that happened. My knee hurts. You might want to swear. Actually, swearing is supposed to help you heal, apparently. You know, but you take care of your knee a little bit. Maybe you're angry at someone who left a box on the floor, or whatever it is, and you move on. if it's really a traumatic experience with NHI, you might need to get mental health support. You might need to go to Unhidden. I love I'm part of the Ontological Security Advisory Group at Unhidden. I'm impressed with what they're doing. You might need to go to any organization that can support a conversation about trauma that you've experienced in relationship with what you experienced as these beings and what happened. Without being concerned about the ontological reality of it. That doesn't matter. It's that you had the traumatic experience, period. I mean, I don't mean to say it doesn't matter. What I'm saying is, like, it's hard to convince people of that, so you can let it go and deal with the experience. So yeah, I guess I feel like that's the way to manage it. So in other words, our go-to is control, and we get afraid of the things that we can't control. Our the ultimate taboo / fear, the fear that drives taboo is, in my view, loss of control. And so then now people are like, we're going to do controlled disclosure, that we're going to control this. It's just like, folks, this is a human, non-human process. This is a consciousness process. This is a developmental process over which we have no control. Which doesn't mean that we're not going to have impulses to try to control it, and it doesn't mean we're not going to have impulses to be afraid. And the treatment is always love. The Band-Aid that works for everything is accessing universal love so you can experience unconditional love.
Let's talk a little bit about engaging what we might call an alien mind. And if this is taking place, at a broad collective level, that's one thing. If it's taking place at an individual level, that's another. How do we begin to understand the interaction at a consciousness-based level with another mind, the mind that is truly not human? It's not biologically supported or girded by what we in our ecology on Earth have. It could be post-biological. It could be artificial. It could be non-physical. How do we begin to understand the interplay, the interface that might be taking place, in your view, Julia?
Oh, I think we draw on our experience. I mean, we already all have experience interacting with AI and figuring out how to talk to AI. We kind of have a model now. Oh, if I say this, the AI is going to think that, so I'll say this other thing. We start to learn the language and the ethos of AI, of different AIs, even of different languages and ethos. So we draw on that model. We draw on the model of dreams and metaphor and mythology, and how that seems to work in our unconscious. Stories that are powerful, sacred secrets that people have held, not to have the secret itself, but the holding of this secret becomes this almost a discipline. We draw on that kind of energy of that mental martial art training. And then I think we draw on our interactions with animals. I did some work with killer whale communication and just getting to know, without even interacting with the animals, just listening to their sounds that were recorded in Antarctica when I wasn't there, listening to their sounds and hearing them in all different environments and just really bathing in that environment gives you a sense of someone's mind. So that's a completely very different kind of creature than humans.
Right.
And so, we get to what we're really scared of. The reason non-human intelligence got named non-human intelligence wasn't because it was non-human, because there's plenty of non-human intelligences on Earth, as everyone has pointed out, right? Killer whales have these huge brains. It comes from this idea. The emphasis is on the intelligence. The concern is they're more intelligent than we are, and we think that nothing that we know of is as intelligent as we are. We think that. That's kind of like the first joke. Because we don't really know how to measure intelligence in animals that don't, or machines that don't have hands and don't have bodies like ours. So I think it's a name based on fear, NHI, fear of something that could control us. When we don't, when like we're all controlled by microbes that are in our gut.
Yes.
But we're used to that. But like if you take an antibiotic that kills your gut microbes, all of a sudden you're like, I don't feel like myself.
Right. Yes.
It's controlling your brain.
I mean, the human pursuit of control is constant, and science is increasingly humbling us as to the lack of control we have. Now, I mean, if we are encountering biological entities that have an off-planet origin and they have a tremendous amount of control over their reality and potentially ours, it does introduce questions of sovereignty and public safety and stability.
Yeah.
And I mean, those are inherent.
Yeah.
I mean, they
And
have intent. They're here for a reason.
Well, that's exactly the question I wanted to ask. And Julia, in some of your talks, you talk about, well, sorry if I get this wrong, motivation and context as critical aspects that can generate fear, excess fear or unhealthy fear. I'm curious, yes, that. And then, but what about them, NHI's potential motivation and context as incentive for whatever it is to engage us, to understand us, to gather information, to gather resources, what have you, all of these possible intents. How do we think about the intent of a non-human?
I mean, I given the way we define what a being is, at the very basic level, a being has the intent to stay alive.
Mhm.
So I would start there. I would say that's the intent that we can be sure of. If we're really sure that it's a being and not like a thought,
Right.
right? Because I don't think thoughts have needs to stay alive. So if it's a being, whether it's biological or metallic, doesn't matter. If it replicates, if it
Mhm.
if it needs things to survive, then its intention is to stay alive. And so that's the same as the gut microbes,
Mhm.
right? Like we're very anthrocentric, right? So we think that these things are here for us, but like gut microbes are here to eat lunch. And they control our brains. And so that's just a byproduct.
And some of them at least don't kill us because they want us to continue living so that they can continue eating.
Because we're like a great farm for them. They're doing their agriculture. They're using our guts as their crops, or to grow their crops. And so so it could be anything from that. And then we also imagine their intent could be to destroy us. And if it is, and if they have enough capacity to do that, then they will. If they can't, if they're sufficiently advanced and their goal is to destroy us, but slowly, so that we kind of watch them destroying us, but then like torture us with these ideas, but then they're like, we'll kill them eventually, like you're playing with an animal and you're kind of a sociopath. An animal that you might kill, that would be sociopathic, but like, okay, maybe that's how they are.
Mhm.
I don't see a lot of evidence of that in their behavior, but honestly, I think we just start with everything needs to survive if it's a thing, if it's a being.
Right.
And so what about being here has to do with their survival, if anything, or does it just have to do with they're just kind of like hanging out? Or does it have to do with they were already here before we existed?
Mhm.
Or does it have to do with their time traveling from the future to give us a message, or to give themselves something that they're missing from the past? I mean, these are the kind of theories, right? But based on their behavior so far, we can know that they want to be in relationship with us.
Mhm.
Even if that want is sociopathic and they're just doing it to play with the cat and the laser pointer.
Right.
Right? But there's
Right.
they have some desire, sociopathic or not, to be in relationship with us. And
Right.
assuming they're beings, they have a desire to live, survive.
Mhm.
That's all we got.
Yeah, I find it frustrating when people say, well, they haven't destroyed us, and so therefore, as if there's one other alternate option, right? And
Right.
so, like, I would say there's multiple contact typologies. There's indifference,
Yeah.
there's observation, there's transaction, integration, acquisition, all of them, and they all could be pursued out of a basic biological or non-biological need for self-preservation and perpetuation, right? I mean, this is coded into our genome as humans, but all life forms on Earth, that to preserve and to perpetuate. And so if they're here interacting, that maybe an initial baseline on intent would be preservation and perpetuation, and maybe of us, but possibly so that for them, like the
Maybe
gut bind.
three of them. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And frankly, they're not indifferent. I mean, right? You don't meet at the cat point if you're indifferent. I mean,
Right.
you could still be a sociopath playing with a laser pointer with a cat that you're going to kill, but that's not indifference. That's an interaction.
Right.
So I think we can scratch that off the list. And
Right.
also the telepathic sort of signals of, or the precognitive telepathic signals of like go to the window or do this, that are just so commonly reported throughout history for thousands of years, right? Those kind of like, I knew I would go outside and see the star in the sky or whatever. That's not indifference. That's engaging with our consciousness. That is interdependent communication.
Right.
I wanted to come back just a little bit to the idea we talked about with love and that whole panorama of ideas, and integrate that with the idea, you also need to be prudent, discerning, clear. There is an intent. We don't understand what it is. We don't understand their nature. And in that process of opening into that state of connectedness and love and all of that, nature, we also need to be rational and approach that. And so how do you see that? Kind of like there's a yin and a yang here.
Except not. I think it's a misunderstanding. I think people often bring this up. I think it's thinking that love is an emotion.
That's not what I mean by that. Love is a state of its nature, it's identity.
Yeah, but it actually helps boundaries rather than move. In other words, it helps discernment. So here's what I mean, and I know it's confusing because we are so used to conditional love, where conditional love is like, I love you, you love me, therefore we're in love. If you don't love me, maybe I don't love you. Maybe I'll take away my love. Unconditional love is this experience that you can only have when you're accessing this universal love force. It's a human response it's like if you put your finger in a socket, like you will have this response, you will get a shock, right? So unconditional love is the name for that kind of positive shock. But it actually is motivational. It's funny because unconditional love can be defined as having the experience of loving, having the experience of being loved without anything needing to change. So loving and being loved without anything needing to change. So it sounds like you would have no boundaries and you'd be like, everything's groovy and fine. What's fascinating is when you have that experience, you absolutely don't think anything needs to change. I know you know what I'm talking about, Chuck. And at the same time, you have this incredible motivation and capacity to change. It's like, oh, if nothing needs to be, like if I'm still loved regardless, well, then suddenly I have the energy to do this thing that I've been meaning to change about myself forever. And so the same thing can happen with discernment. We absolutely do need to be prudent, and we are wired by the informational substrate, by the universe, to look out for our own survival, to look out for our own mental health, our own physical health, and our own community health. And so, of course, and when you feel like nothing needs to change and you're in that state of unconditional love, then that feeling also doesn't need to change. The feeling like I have to protect myself. I go back a lot to for some reason, I think of the Navy's, the SEALs. I think there was SEAL Team 6 or whoever who got Osama bin Laden. And I met someone who was either on that team or close to that team. And I said, or knew about that team. And I said, tell me about love in the special forces. And they were saying, oh my gosh, there's so much love. There's this brotherly love that connects the guys in the special forces. There's like profound, like they would do anything for each other. They feel completely interdependent and they feel this complete love. And I said, and what do you do when you have to kill someone like Osama bin Laden? And this guy said, so you do it out of love, out of protection, and you almost find yourself having love for the enemy. Like you do it so well that it feels like it's part of the act. And I said, and then the only thing that would upset me about that is if the team didn't treat the body with respect. Did you not treat this person with respect that you killed? And he said, yes, no, of course we have to treat, anyone we have to kill in special forces with respect. And, but then he said, but we did dump him in the deepest part of the ocean. And so, and I'm like, yeah, I get it. So, which is also out of love. So it's complex and it's nuanced and
The gist of
no
my
one,
thing-
no one has to be wrong about it. You know what I mean?
the gist was I don't see it as either or. Discernment and this love, they're not it's not either or, it's both and.
It's both and they magnify each other.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think of this famous quote real quick, Ted, just, the only way is through, Robert Frost. It's almost like we're frozen in this dichotomy of be loving, the love and light crowd as it's typologized, which is just be open, be accepting, trust, just as your default modus operandi. And then the other side of be reject, resist, push away, call it demonic, call it evil or malevolent. And so you're kind of frozen in this place of immobility. You can, or even inability to perceive, I would say as well. Whereas I'm getting this kind of gist of like, to be in that flow state of unconditional love, as you would maybe call it, is to be able to go in and to accept and to expand but also integrate your full capabilities and to use them. Use them for your interest, for others' interest, for the greater interest of life beyond Earth. I mean, it doesn't have to be so insular and so defended, and yet also so blindly optimistic.
Yes, both of those are examples of sort of answering the problem of fear of the unknown and fear of loss of control by saying, I know the solution is we're not going to have any boundaries and we're not going to count ourselves as important. That's the love and light, like just accept everything and you can become slaves to NHI or whatever crowd. And then there's the, I know we're going to solve the fear problem by we're going to destroy all the, UAP and they're out to get us and we know exactly what to do. And just if we just be with the reality for a second that we don't know, which I believe is the giant disclosure. The reason I wrote my book, Have a Nice Disclosure, is I wanted to say, like, look, it's not like there's someone who knows the answer who's going to say it one day. Like maybe there'll be an alien body or whatever, but sort of who cares? Like the actual answer of what's going on.
Yeah.
It's inside of you and it's for you. It's your specific answer. It's your specific disclosure. You can do that with love. And that's what that's for.
I spend a good deal of time training with meditation masters. And they talked a bit about psi function. And the warning was that it's a branch on the tree of knowledge. And if you get very far out on it, it'll break out from under you. And that you should understand that it's part of the overall presence of yourself. It's one of the things that you do, along with feel things with your fingertip and all the other ways that you interact with reality. But the real caveat they offered was do not operate on delusion. Know whether you're seeing or confronting a delusion and avoid it. Stay present and stay aware, because awareness in the end is really what Buddhism is. You're training your awareness, and your awareness includes these paranormal capacities, as well as your day-to-day, ability to reason your way through things, and that your delusions are dangerous because you're attached to them. You have an emotional connection to them, and that if you really want to understand and perceive what's going on around you, then you have to still that, and that's where the objectivity comes in. And even the Dalai Lama said that if science finds something wrong with Buddhism will have to change. The point is mental training. So I see in your work and in your practice a lot of parallels with these old systems of self-awareness and engagement. And I think also that when it comes to dealing with the other, whoever that is, whether it's an NHI or a tiger in the forest or men that you aren't getting along with or that want to hurt you. It's all the same kind of problem in the end. And what it really involves is your ability to perceive them correctly and perceive the problem correctly, and then take the correct step, whatever that is. And one example, I'll just share this story. A friend of mine, he's passed away now. He was a lieutenant in Vietnam, and he was leading a platoon on a patrol, and he came to a Buddhist temple and brought his men in. And of course, they're all very jumpy. They're all armed to the teeth. They're on patrol. They're in enemy territory. And now they're inside this temple. And the masters there are facing a problem. They have a bunch of armed guys that are not Buddhists in their space. And how do they manage that? So they went around and they fed everybody, and they sat down with them. They offered cannabis to those who would take it. And they let the group just be in that space and talk to them about their lives. And by doing that, they kept battle from coming to their space. That they were able to create a buffer in the thinking, in the mentality of the beings that were around them to get an outcome they're looking for.
The Band-Aid was love. I mean, so there, if all you have is a hammer, so if all you have is a missile or a drone, so the Band-Aid can be love. And there's this wonderful book by Christian Piccolini, a Chicagoan who was in a skinhead band called White American Youth. And that's the name of the book, White American Youth. And he was a Nazi skinhead guy. And he currently, and since writing the book, he has recognized that what everyone is looking for is love. What everyone is looking for is the experience of unconditional love. Just think for a second of someone who you think of as the enemy. I don't care if it's a political person, a personal person, a geopolitical foe, NHI, whatever it is, anyone that you experience as the enemy. Back to the intention question. If the universe really does run on love, then you can bet that being has an intention of moving towards love and may be very lost about how to do that. Very, very lost. Some people are very lost about how to do that. But
they are.
Back to intention, I think if it's really true that there's a physics of love and that's the foundation of the universe, then there is an urge in every being to move towards love. And so that we can count on that. And what Christian Piccolini did was start converting people out of the Nazi skinhead movement by loving them.
Shedding delusion. The delusion that they would get this love if they continued in their neo-Nazi ways.
Yep. Yeah, the delusion of separation.
That's right.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
I want to acknowledge those watching may be finding this a very uncommon conversation on the UFO, UAP, or NHI topic, but I think it's great. Welcome to a more expanded frame on what might be taking place. I think the phrase "elevate the debate." Well, that's with logic and reason, and Ted, you brought that up. That's important. But the words, we have to oxygenate this issue. We have to oxygenate the debate, which is to settle down, open up, anchor ourselves in our core human knowledge regarding what makes a healthy relationship, what puts you in a healthy place, and not be oscillating between fear and hope and all of these reactions with which you cannot proceed. You cannot engage a larger exosystemic or xenosystemic environment as a human being if you are decoupled or de-anchored from that core humanity and really that core linkage you have with the underlying realities of the universe, which if it's love, if that is the fundamental current that takes life forward, I think that's a core aspect of this. And maybe we're getting into the spiritual side of what contact with NHI might mean, and that we're expanding into a larger milieu of how those forces toward reunion, away from separation or isolation, Julia, in one of your talks, you brought up Maslow's hierarchy and how the missing extra tier above was transcendence of self, not self-actualization, but self-transcendence. That's a component here, that we have the potential to transcend ourselves and maybe even our humanity, even as we intelligently secure our environment, our bodies, our minds, our children, our societies in the process. So it's not this kind of black or white, just rush into that expanded frame. It's to kind of hold all of it. And I feel like this conversation is bridging between the very immediate nature of what contact might be, real bodies, real minds, real possible abductions of real people, but also this expansion into the larger flow of where life takes an individual and maybe a whole species in the universe.
Cool. Nice
Appreciate
summary.
it. I love this. This is great. I do want to, if I may, run across the bridge from the big lens to the small lens for a moment, because I know, Chuck, Ted, we talked about wanting to kind of like look at what is the point at which we become aware that we are being engaged at a consciousness-based level by a potential non-human. And Julia, in your opening, you talked about a variety of indicators that might be, what was it? Skin conductivity was one. Can you remind us the others?
Well, that was for presentiment experiments. It hadn't occurred to me until just now, with you linking that to contact with NHI. But yes, anything physiological.
Yeah.
I mean, there's got to be, I hate when I say there's got to be people studying this, because that usually means there isn't people studying this and I'm doomed. But anyway, there should be someone studying this. Maybe there is. Yeah. Well, sort of when people what you would do is you would do an experiment where you like have a button that you press and you go into someone who can sort of be in contact, as they call it. I'm putting it in quotes because it's not physical contact. In this case, it's usually some kind of consciousness contact. So people who say I get in contact with NHI, you would put them in a booth and you would maybe record EEG. You might record respiration. You might record skin conductance, gut motility, temperature, heart rate, all these things, vagal nerve firing. And you might ask them, just press the button, just like they do in meditation studies. Like when you get into that transcendent state, press the button. Or right after, usually it's better right after. So you could do an experiment like that and say, when you're talking to the aliens, press the button, or maybe right after because you're in another state, and then sort of look at what that looks like. That would be an interesting experiment to do. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Sorry, it just came into my head.
Absolutely. 1000%. And I think we want to get into, there's discussions. I'm hearing some of them that those out in the field detecting UAP, the Human Institute just hosted this conference on UAP detection and tracking. Well, some of those groups are observing physiological events in themselves as they undertake the technical sensing of UAP. So what would it look
you could feel
after that data?
Yeah. Sorry, every time we talk about this little cardinal shows up and then flies away outside the window. So
thankfully it's not an owl. Cardinal.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Get ready for Steven Spielberg. So what would those data look like, you're saying?
Yeah, like what would we begin to capture in the experiencer of a UAP exposure or a reported NHI encounter that would give us some data on the physiologic aspect of the consciousness-based interaction?
I mean, whatever you want. I mean, like, sorry to shrug that off. It's just that you could do whatever experiment you wanted to look at whatever you wanted if you had IRB approval and you went and got funding to do it. But the question itself comes from this thing that I've, as a cognitive neuroscientist, I come across this all the time, and the discipline is about what is the relationship between the mind and what's going on in the brain and the body, right? But there's this focus on the brain and the body as if that makes things more real. Like as if you show that it changes in the brain and the body, then it's really real. But the brain and the body will always change with your experience. So what does it tell you? Like why, like I just question the motivation behind the experiment. It's like, it's gonna change. You're gonna be able to see a difference because someone who's having this profound experience is gonna have different feelings than someone who's not having the profound experience. We know that. So you can actually just talk to people and they'll tell you, I did not feel like I was just sitting looking at my computer. It felt very different.
Yeah.
And they'll explain that. And so I think it's a lot easier to do that kind of preliminary research. And we keep turning to this materialist view that the only thing that's real is physical reality, when in fact we have so much evidence that the only thing that's real is non-locality. And physical reality is something that we create with our brains. We create with our brains the story of physical reality and matter. We infer it from this information that comes in through different means.
Yeah.
So
in part, yeah, and I hear that, and I think that's fantastic because now we listen to the experience versus demand hard proof of the body changing, thinking that will reveal the experience.
And the experience is hard proof. Like what? Like how do we think we have an experience of the physical world through anything other than our experience? The only proof we have of the physical world is through our experience. And people say, well, no, I can measure something with a microscope. It's like, yeah, through your eyes. Or I could get an AI to tell me that the planet, okay, through your, mind and your eyes. I mean, like, I could hear the sound of me knocking on a table through my ears. There's zero information about physical reality that we have that doesn't come through our senses.
Yeah.
So that is the hard reality. Experience is number one. Descartes did not die in vain, I hope. He said, I think, therefore I am, but he could have said experience is happening. Forget the I part of it. Experience is happening. That's all we can know. Now, what that experience is about starts to tell us things about this physical world, et cetera, but primary is experience. If you're the most conservative scientist in the world, you have to see that.
I think, yes, I love this. And I think, part of the power of this is we listen to people's experience and their testimony.
Yes.
Versus we disregard it as subjective, as meaningless, essentially as data, when it is data. I want to, Chuck, before we dive deeper.
And all data are subjective.
Right. There might be two utilities that I could imagine to field experimentation of physiological effects of UAP in UAP encounters. One might be moving the science crowd who has an evidentiary demand or standard and is still anchored in the physical. So there's some utility in moving the herd, and also, but there might be a set of effects that these UAP and the intelligence behind them are having broadly that is totally unacknowledged. And I remember I had the Tedesco brothers on my podcast Emergent recently, and we were talking about how the modern version of the iPhone has over 10 extremely advanced sensors, which if that phone was on the body of an experiencer during, for example, a reported abduction, and you were to tap those data streams from those sensors, you might learn something about everything. And so at this moment, I want to just play back this clip. I think it's apropos. And Ted, you and I talked about this. This is just a 3.5-minute clip of Massimo Teodorani in his talk a few months ago at this series, talking about the potential for EEG in this context. So let's just have a listen.
Take a person which is induced in a deep meditative state, so it must be calibrated. Like we have to calibrate the person. At least we have to try to do that. And this person is monitored using an EEG analyzer, electroencephalograph, clearly with all the protocols that must be used in this case, using a neuro scientist that take care of the person, considering that this is not an active injection of something in the brain, at least not in this way, but it's just passive, okay? It could be active, but I will tell you later. Meanwhile, at the same exact time, the electromagnetic field around is monitored. So microwave or VLF, ELF. We use also magnetometer in this case because we want to see not how strong is the magnetic field, like in the case that I discussed before. But we want to see if there is a magnetic perturbation at the point where we are making measurements. Then, at the same time, we monitor the phenomenon with a camera, DSLR camera, video camera, spectrograph, using optical instruments. And now the funny part is coming. We aim a laser beam to the plasma ball, and we want to see what happens to the plasma ball. Okay. At the same time, we want to see what happens to the brain. Is the brain wave changing? Namely, the alpha, beta, and theta state amplitude, are they changing? Or is something else happening? Clearly, we have to calibrate, we have to prepare, we have to make the same measurement with a control sample, with a person that is different, and then because there is also the emotional aspect, okay? Or conversely, suppose to use the Michael Persinger so-called God helmet and inject under neurophysiological control pulsed magnetic field in the brain. What happens to the light ball? Is there an entanglement situation? Are the two things hypothesized to be both quantum system, the brain and the plasma ball? This is an hypothesis, it's not confirmed. Can two quantum systems can communicate in real time together? So can this demonstrate that there is really a connection between the two things? And more, is there any message that is left in the brain?
I think Massimo leaves it at the question of a message. Is it possible to have a residual body of information left in the brain? Yeah, curious your thoughts on that, Julia.
Well, I mean, you could tell he's a physicist. A physicist, I was raised by a theoretical physicist. The way they talk about the brain and the mind and doing experiments with the brain is kind of like the way non-physicists talk about doing physics experiments. That was a bad experiment. Like the way he defined it, it's not a good experiment. You're not going to learn anything. So here's the deal with EEG. So the brain is incredibly complex. EEG has extremely good time resolution. I've done plenty of EEG experiments. You can find whatever you want in there. There are so many free parameters. And yes, you can have it precisely timed with this other event, and you're going to have to, like, let's say you really wanted to do this experiment against my advice, you'd probably have to get, I don't know, 1,000 people to do the experiment because of the interindividual variability. And even then, you're going to be able to find something that isn't actually representative of anything that has to do with reality, or this kind of reality that we're talking about. So if he thinks, I guess his hypothesis is that in visitation with plasmas or orbs, that they leave a message in the brain that the person does not, that is unconscious, that the person doesn't, that has to be decoded because the person's unconscious about it. So do you think that, like, it's just so primitive? I'm not saying he's primitive. I like him. I'm just saying, like, this way of thinking about the brain and the mind is so primitive. Like, and if you were an intelligence that could communicate to humans and understands consciousness well enough to communicate to humans telepathically, which I think we all agree that's the situation. Everyone has telepathic experiences with NHI. That's what the people talk about, right? So let's assume that. And they can turn on something inside of you that is telepathic, and they know how to do that. Do they really need to, like, put a little message in your brain for later? Or can they just turn on the message whenever it's needed? Just because and it may not even be in your brain. It's like, it's this addiction to the physicality as the source of everything. It's like a reductionist fantasy. Like, if you could just figure out what the code of the brain is. And then he asks the question, well, is there anything left in there who's talking or whatever? It's like he's asking, what is the neural code? We don't know what the neural code is. That's like one of the biggest questions in neuroscience. We've never known what the neural code is. We still don't know what the neural code is. And you can't get the answer to the neural code by doing that experiment. So it's frustrating because it's like, I get it. Physicists believe that they have the right to talk about anything because they're supposed to be super smart, but it's irritating because it gives people this idea of like, oh, why don't we just do this bad experiment that will tell us nothing and waste, probably $200,000 doing it. So yeah, sorry to rail on about that, but it's just
No, this is the dialogue between disciplines in science.
It's like if your question is what are plasma communicating, ask people how they feel before and after their experience. So the rule with any physiology experiment is you should be studying something that you already know is happening from the behavior or the perception. If you're studying perception, you already know that people see like visual illusions. So now you want to understand the physiology of what's going on during the visual illusion that we know that they see. With predictive anticipatory activity or presentiment, we already know people have precognition. What's going on with their bodies when they're having precognition? With plasmas, so if we already knew for sure that there was a particular behavioral impact or experience with plasmas, and we had already done careful behavioral tests and perceptual tests with them, where we know about people's experience, we could do psychophysics, which is basically where you treat the brain and the mind like a black box, and you have the inputs and the outputs, and then you figure out what's going on in the black box as a result of the inputs and the outputs. That all of those ways are ways of saying there's something happening here. Now we can try to understand the physiology of it, but the physiology takes it to an even more complex level. It's not simplifying. There's even more factors. So you first want to really know that there's something going on. It doesn't help the situation to say, and I found this thing.
I'm curious as to, an experience of euphoria, which some experiencers report. So if you know that euphoria is a common experience, how would you go about understanding what triggered it? Is it endogenous? Is it exogenously caused?
You can't separate those by doing the physiology. So if someone experiences euphoria, very likely they're going to have like norepinephrine release. They're going to have some vagal nerve issue stuff going on with their vagal nerve. Like we can bet that, but that showing that doesn't tell you whether it came from the orb or came from inside of them. We don't have any way to answer that question because we don't know what it means for that to come from outside of you, except through your experience. It's like experience gets left out every time as an explanatory feature, but it is the explanatory feature. So it's just an irritating stance.
Yeah. And I ask because, many say, well, it felt good, the experience, therefore they must be good. They must have a good intent. And it's like, how do we understand the feel good experience or the feel bad experience? People say, I was horribly traumatized. And how do we understand, was that intended to be a traumatic experience?
You don't understand it by looking at physiology. It just tells you the person had the experience and there are physiological echoes of that. How you understand that is by doing very careful phenomenological research, talking to a lot of people and understanding the before circumstances and the after circumstances. So if someone randomly comes to you and gives you heroin and you have no choice about whether to take it, you might say, wow, it was an amazing experience of my life. But then afterwards I felt like, what the F? I was not in control and you gave this heroin, and that is very traumatizing, right? That's a different experience than someone giving you heroin and you're going, okay, yeah, I'm in. Like this is thanks. I wanted that. So it's informed phenomenology, it's discussions, it's talking to more than the people who show up and seeking out the people who don't show up and are afraid to show up. So it's like jumping to physiology is just an old school way of saying we don't believe you and now we want to prove it. It's like it doesn't convince anyone because everyone knows every experience you have is reflected in the brain and the body.
Ted, I want to bring you on stage here because I'd like to, I think we should explore this further, which is, so what would applied phenomenology look like on the experiencer topic? How would we get in to understand and parse between positive, negative, different body states, different mind states, to understand, what is the experience? And I get your point, Julia, which is the experience is driving physiology. And so you can't just go to physiology and say, look, norepinephrine was up, therefore. It's like, well, the experience drove it up, right? And so, but to understand the nature of the UFO experience, as it was long ago put, how would we begin to do that at a research level?
Well, I think you have to be careful phenomenologist. I mean, so those who do careful phenomenology worry about the selection, who's coming to talk versus who's not coming to talk. How can we get a pool of people who would never think to talk about this, but just walk up to their door or something, or have a meeting or something where we can ask them one by one individually, have you ever felt like this or that or the other thing? And it's just as important to talk to people who have never had an experience with NHI as it is to talk to people who have had an experience, so you can understand the range of what's sort of normal for a group of people and extraordinary experiences, right? And then another thing you can do there's just wonderful books about phenomenology that people can delve into, but excuse me, one technique that I think is really interesting is experience sampling. So you make an app that people agree to be in your study, and for a month they have the app on their phone, and it randomly texts them at some point during the day, and it says, what are you experiencing right now? Do you have this? What is your relationship with NHI? Or whatever the questions are that you've decided ahead of time you're going to ask. And then they forget about it and whatever, and then 3.5 weeks later, or whatever it is, it does it again. So it's just random sampling. So you get a sense of time of day, you get a sense of geographic location. If you do that with enough people, right, and you with the Tedesco brothers or with any of the apps that have a bunch of different sensors, as we spoke about, then you're going to end up being able to tie in these experiences with what has been. You want to tie it in with physical reality, tie it in with not physical reality in their body, because it's always going to correlate, tie it in with radar from fighter pilots in the area.
Yeah, right. Like technical sensing of UAP, as Mitch Randall, Skywatch, or David Hooper, Eldion are proposing doing, to layer that with some sort of broad-based random community engagement tool or platform that if a UAP zips past Phoenix, Arizona, and you get this swath of positive euphoria in its wake, you might start to understand the effects through the experience.
That's right.
Dr. Teodorani was speaking about field research in hotspots, real time during events as they occur. And I've been to a couple of these places that he's worked, and they are very interesting. And trying to understand, what is happening and how much of a role the observer plays in the incidents themselves, whether it's a performance or whether you just saw something because you were there to see it. These kind of things I think are helpful. It's really difficult because the scope of experience around NHI is really broad. We have many stories that just span the gap from one to the other as far as good or bad goes. And we don't really know how to even determine what truth is in these experiences to start with before we can even assess them in terms of the safety or intent. Involved.
You don't have to determine what truth is from experience, because that's not the point.
Right.
So radar or LiDAR is about, or FLIR is about ontological truth. That's the way, even though everything's through experience, that's the way we've agreed upon we're going to get ontological reality. There either was or there wasn't something material there. Right now, who knows about things that are non-material, but in any case, or multidimensional, but in any case, if something's material there that LiDAR and FLIR and radar can detect, then okay. So phenomenology is not about figuring out the truth. This is where the mistake is. This is what I'm saying the mistake is. You're asking the wrong question. Is your experience true? The question is, what are the experiences? Everyone has experiences all the time. you don't ask, is it true that you're bored?
Hmm.
It's like, yeah, because I'm bored. Like, you know what I mean? Or is it true that you're angry? Is that ontologically true? And it's like, no, the person's experience, even if they're lying, even if they're just completely making up a story because they wanted attention, you can detect that with skilled phenomenologists. And as you question sort of what their motivations are, what is that? You know, people are good. There's a whole field called psychology where people are actually good at figuring out sort of what's going on inside of someone, and we can use those tools. We don't have to pretend they don't exist. And in fact, if we pretend they don't exist, then we're failing ourselves, because this is all about the human mind. This is not about spaceships in the sky. That's the booby prize. This is about the human mind. So let's use the tools we have.
Hmm.
I want to suggest bringing this around to a different kind of look at this from a sort of a sociological or all human response to this, you know, and back to the new science, that, you know, in building this new sense of science, we've got to bring all kinds of researchers into the process, all kinds of mindsets, you know, because we have to have a whole of humanity response to this. It's rational, you know, so bridging the gap. You know, so here we've had this really incredibly fascinating conversation, you know, about all this stuff. But so developmentally, like to bring other researchers up the curve, the learning curve, the risk curve, to begin to embrace this, you know, the physicists, you know, and all these other guys people are out there, you know, on the cusp of being able to do this. How do you see that? Do you have any thoughts around what evolves, helps the scientific community develop towards research?
It's a new field. Yeah, my friend Cassie Veaton would call it field formation. We're in a field formation stage. And what would help that is if, again, the reason I got so frustrated with Massimo is not because he was trying. I think it's great that he was trying. It's that he's not aware that he's asking a question that doesn't make sense. And so if what I think we could do, this goes back to the conversation with Gary Nolan I was having, is frame the questions. What if we get a bunch of people together and have a field formation party or meeting or something, and frame what are the questions? Like, let's think carefully about the questions. We're not even going to try to answer them, but can we get the right words for the questions?
Hmm.
You know,
That would be very important to do, I think, and we could facilitate that. I think it's necessary. We're running up to the second hour here, and this has been great, very interesting, very expansive. And I wanted to end on this very interesting concept, Julia, that you brought forward in one of your lectures on cognitive infrastructure. And I have a short few-minute clip I'd like to play where you succinctly present what it is and a proposal for strengthening and securing cognitive infrastructure. And so let's have a watch, and then we can just kind of talk about that toward the end.
okay, I'll see if I'm irritated by that. And I'm just bringing it on home with a proposal, then there's going to be time for questions. Well, first of all, I want to ask what cognitive infrastructure is. People talk about cognitive warfare. So using the mind to deplete resources or to change the direction of an adversary. Cognitive warfare is an attack on cognitive infrastructure. So if you have good cognitive infrastructure in your country, you're much more resilient. So attending to what allows for resilient cognitive infrastructure is really important for national security, as well as the UAP problem, which is also important for national security. So it all kind of comes together. So that's why I'm talking about securing cognitive infrastructure, super important. So consider taboo and dysfunctional fear as outdated and impractical responses to the fear of losing control, fear of the unknown. Like, just kind of like, that's the first step, is like, be aware of that. And you don't have to point fingers about it, like everyone's doing it, because we're all humans and we're all created to fear the unknown. So whatever, it's normal. We're all innocent, right? So I'm not saying that people do things that everyone's innocent of. I'm not saying that people don't do bad things. I'm saying that there are reasons people do bad things. And it's because we're built in this way. And we get to sort of see that and there are consequences for those bad things, and we move forward. So consider taboo and dysfunctional fear as outdated and impractical responses to the fear of losing control, fear of the unknown. And then examine, how do we create an environment to support intuitive or System 1 based super capabilities that personally, I'm slipping that in there, I think that will allow us to better understand UAP, what we call super capabilities, what we call consciousness effects. I think the reason we have those at the same time as we have UAP experiences is because they're part of it. And we're not going to be able to understand one side of the coin without the other side of the coin. They're going to dovetail. So examine how to create an environment to support intuitive System 1 based super capabilities and the understanding of UAP consequently. So I vote for, this is obviously all my votes, I vote for using universal unconditional love to heal the pain and the suffering, but probably you're healing more of the suffering caused by taboo, and also to help avoid the future use of taboo. So I didn't really talk about it much, but my nonprofit TILT, the Institute for Love and Time, creates science-based technology that supports people in using unconditional love to weave through their own experience of themselves through time. And we've actually shown that it boosts well-being and helps, especially for people who have had trauma. So there are ways you can actually now scale, use unconditional love to scale recovery from trauma related to anything, including taboo. And provide a low fear, low taboo, therefore high motivation environment. Now, it may not be the entire world, it may be your working group, but you have to provide a low fear, low taboo, therefore high motivation environment to perform difficult UAP intelligent tasks, like understanding non-physical UAP, or like trying to figure out what are the beautiful, what are the cruel aspects of UAP engagement, or like trying to understand intentions behind UAP, showing up at nuclear sites. That if you're working in that high fear, high taboo situation, you're not going to get anywhere with those harder tasks. And then finally, create a well-informed UAP intelligence ecosystem with secure cognitive infrastructure, so people who are emotionally mature, by which I mean they are aware of the way they can be manipulated, and they're aware that other people can be manipulated and they don't participate in that. In that, creating a well-informed UAP intelligence ecosystem with secure cognitive infrastructure in which analysts understand the risks of taboo and the risks of dysfunctional fear, and they refuse to participate in them. Now, I don't mean if you have an anxiety disorder, you can't be in this, but you should get your anxiety disorder treated, and it would help you. And so what I mean is refusing to participate is every time you have to make a decision, asking yourself, how is this playing into dysfunctional fear? How is this playing into taboo? And how can I not do it? If so, how can I not participate? And creating that environment has a lot to do, in my view, with creating a leadership-based, I guess I would call it a service or a love leadership model. So anyone who's in a leadership position, knowing that your job is to love the people who you're working with and to celebrate the interdependence and to move toward the good.
So thank you for that. I was in the room for that. I did not recall that segment of your talk at the 2024 SCU conference. That clip is from that conference. But I found that fascinating. When we think of our infrastructural capabilities to interact or contend with a non-human reality, who is thinking of the cognitive? And so, and with disclosure, there's about to be a surge of experiences, right, in the general public who may never have had a conscious experience of this phenomenon. Well, they're about to. And so what is our cognitive infrastructure nationally, internationally? I think that's just fascinating. And what does it mean to build it or strengthen it and secure it? So anything you'd like to add almost 2 years on?
I have a hard stop in 1 minute, so I will just say, 1, I got to get a haircut. I really liked my hair. 2, anything that we could create or use to undergird or support our cognitive infrastructure, love, and also I think we need a national service program in the US, literally a draft where you don't have to go in the military, but you do need to do at least a year of service. We need so much service in this country, and I think that would support self-transcendence. And I think that part of the service could be understanding UAP or UAP tracking. Could be art, could be technology, could be supporting elders, getting groceries. So I think that comes to mind, and I know it seems like it's not related to UAP, but I think it's all in there together.
Yeah. Well, I want to honor your 1 minute hard cut, Julia. We're at the top of the hour, so thank you so much. We'll have some closing discussion, Chuck, Ted, and I. But is there anything you'd like to let everyone know about your work, your research, your organizations, where they can find you and learn more?
Yes. TILT, the Institute for Love and Time, can be found at loveandtime.org. We are changing our name to Applied Love Labs, ALL. So our new website will be applied.love, but it's not there yet. It won't be there for another 2 weeks. So loveandtime.org is where you go now. And then have a nice disclosure. I love this book. Best book I've ever written. I said everything I wanted to say. Didn't say anything I didn't want to say. So check that out. And this is my husband's art. Isn't that cool?
And is that a map? Is that what am I? There are associations, it looks like, drawn between points.
Yeah, I don't get it either. I ask him and he's like, I have no idea. He's an artist. I think it's cool.
Nice. We'll keep it in system 1. Okay. Fascinating. Yeah. Thank you, Julia, for all your work, your courage, your contributions to the UAP field. And we look forward to engaging more the field of cognitive neuroscience and bringing everyone on board into this new science of NHI.
Whoops.
And I think she had a hard stop right at the hour. Ted,
Right
Chuck,
there.
yes. Your thoughts, your anything you'd like to share?
I'd like to see about 3 more hours of that.
Yeah.
There's so much to unpack here. And I tried to kind of focus a little bit on established mental training, but it's too deep a topic, really, I think, for this particular venue.
Yeah.
Her ideas around love are very interesting as a cosmological force, along with information. You know, the idea of integration, this is not new. You know, humans have been talking about integrating for a long time. You know, meditative practices are all about that, you know, that's what awareness is integrating your consciousness with the environment and learning from it. So I think she's right there. It's interesting to hear it come from a technical scientific side, because I've sat with a lot of monks, you know, and that's a different, but they're saying the same things, very close. You want to be a little careful about that assumption, but pretty close. They're saying the same kinds of things.
Yeah,
I enjoyed her. That's the bottom line. I enjoyed her. I enjoyed her energy. You know, I think that there's something in. So I'm a practical guy at the end of the day. You know, I mean, you have to kind of see how all of this, you know, kind of the power of her ideas, the power of her energy. You know, how does that influence, you know, this new science? And I love the idea of gathering people together and getting the right questions answered. I thought that was a very powerful, pragmatic, implementable kind of thing. And to do that from this state of openness and love and connectivity, that's a very, I mean, there's no either or between that and being prudent, rational, and discerning. These are just really key ideas in my mind to embrace personally and as a group of, you know. So anyway, but bottom line, I just enjoyed her. She made me laugh and smile a lot.
Yeah.
I think her comment about being a non-local universe ought to be pinned on the wall somewhere. I'm going to get a sticky note and hang it on my computer.
Right.
Because really, the more you think about it, the more you realize it's everywhere.
Yeah.
In all kinds of processes. And, you know, she was talking about indirectly about heart math research, you know, and the studies they did with the traders in London. So, and I think that was Ray Bradley. that whole idea of conscious engagement, testing it, looking at it more carefully. It's really, I'm sorry, I kind of flooded there, but my point was that some of the work that they did at Heart Math involved coherence, and it was looking at the brain's relationship to the intercardiac nerve bundle, and how there is a coherent moment that's possible between these two separate brains inside of your own body.
Yeah.
And how that might apply to a much larger perspective of how brains would connect in other ways.
Right. Too much larger brain. I mean, the universe could essentially be one massive brain that's cognating and has a sense of origin and direction and destination. Who knows? We get into the metaphysical and even the theological. But yes, Ted, I really appreciated her expanded view on getting even outside of a field of knowledge, cognitive neuroscience, and into transcendence of field, transcendence of self, and getting the scientific community together to ask these questions, not in the spirit of a competitive scientific effort, which I think is going to happen with any form of official disclosure more than we've seen so far. Everyone who's anyone is going to want to write a paper about what they think this is and how it should be dealt with. I'm not sure we will cooperate as a global scientific community, let alone a political one, on the disclosure of NHI. And so getting out ahead of that, some sort of summit or conference among multidisciplinary fields of knowledge to articulate those questions, to examine the data that exists, the data that could exist, and to bring in the phenomenological aspect, lest it just boiled down to the materialistic, if we can't see it, it's not there. It's very clear that there is something here interacting, and the experience of the individual is one of the key sensors of the nature of that presence and its interactivity with the human species.
She made that argument very powerfully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, Ted, if I were to pin something on the wall as a permanent, it's that there is this informational substrate that you either tap into or don't, but it can tap into you, meaning you must relinquish this illusion of control in the universe and acknowledge that you are a fish swimming in a very big sea. And those waters enter and exit your gills every second that you breathe or every second that you cognate. And so in light of that, what then is the individual to do, right? How are they to hold their presence in the universe when they do encounter another being? Like, to your point, Ted, it's the same with any human relationship. If you encounter someone who is toxically expressing their quest for love by using or abusing you or manipulating you, how do you, Chuck, then to your point as a psychologist, thank you, implement those barriers, those necessary boundaries that are pragmatic, that do protect you psychologically, physiologically? So,
well, when we're talking about people with exposures, the ones that feel good about it aren't showing up in the psychologist's office.
mm-hmm.
It's the ones that are having trouble integrating the information, or they may have had traumatic experience that we would all agree was traumatic, that nobody would want to go through.
Right.
And so, as an experiencer myself, my struggle has been to accept that I am not a lesser being, and that I have autonomy, that I have a say in all of this. And if I want to, if nothing else, I can do myself in, I'm in control. In other words, that much control, not much else. Right.
Yeah.
And the idea that if I was going to give advice to people with exposures is cultivate a warrior mind. And I mean that in the sense that you protect, nurture, heal, you act in loving kindness, and you transcend. The great warriors are doctors and healers. They go through whatever they go through to get it out of their system as warriors, and they transcend and they become something that's a much bigger expression of who they are. And that's kind of my advice to anybody in life in general, and particularly people with traumatic experience and and UAP exposures is start getting bigger. You know, learn to transcend, get larger, get away from the delusions that you've been coded with, you know, in terms of who you are and how you fit in reality and what's okay and what isn't, and what you can do about things and what you can't. Let it all go and find out what the real answers to those observations are. You know, ground yourself in becoming a bigger person. I was miserable for years and years and years as a witness who was having ongoing exposures, and I'm still not happy about it all. But I'm a whole different human being in terms of how I relate to my reality than I was then. I don't see myself as a victim anymore. And so that's the word of encouragement I would offer to people with exposures is. And this is kind of what she's telling you too, is that, you know, this love and connectivity, it isn't love and light and, oh, there are good little space brothers. It's about understanding our connectivity in the universe and being able to see them for who and what they are, and then make a decision on our boundaries, as you pointed out.
Yes.
Is that healthy or toxic, you know, and make a good decision from that point. So very stimulating. I always enjoy talking with Julia. She's a very bright person. Always opens up new tracks.
She walks that thin line, you know, it's a very thin line of her, you know, understanding, you know, that doesn't fall over into the woo and doesn't, you know, and it has plenty of science in it, you know, and very, very rational finally, you know, in a mystical, you know, kind of paradigm. It was fabulous, frankly. Yeah.
It's creative and very intelligent, and I just wish more power to her. And I'd like to see more researchers like her stepping up. These are voices that a lot of us didn't know 5 years ago, you know, in this field, and more are out there. And there's more coming. So looking forward to it.
Yeah. Ted, beautifully put, by the way, and a great call to action there for those watching to claim their power, engage, broaden, and perceive and make decisions. Don't minimize yourself as a human being in the presence of super intelligences that are, we assume, thousands or millions of years beyond us. There's too many assumptions driving our real-time interaction with cognitively with what is in the world potentially. And so we have to get out of these dichotomies of love and fear, of hope and rejection, and all of these excessively early and conclusive statements about the cognitive basis of what NHI is and wants, whether they're malevolent. You know, I don't think malevolence needs to be defined right now. I think we need to open our eyes and identify our own human intent and negotiate that intent as we do it daily as human beings with other human beings. Well, now we're in the presence of non-human beings, and we may perpetually be so. So it's this combined thing of expansion, right? Of unconditional loving willingness to go into this universe, but also to then focalize back down to our own human vehicle, our own human senses, our own human decision making, and not relinquish that or minimize it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because, you know, I mean, if you have no boundaries, if you have no intentions that are known to you, if anything can be done to you and you will have nothing to say about it, then you will be victimized probably in this universe of souls, whether they be human or non-human. I mean, you know, and to think otherwise is willful ignorance. To think that the universe is love and light and down here is darkness, and if we expand into that, we will be redeemed. I don't think we need a redemption narrative placed upon this event. I think we need a grounded, whole human, all of humanity engagement, like you said, Chuck.
If you stay in that state that you just described, life will disabuse you of it sooner or later.
You say so as a clinical psychologist, having seen that played out.
Having lived through it.
Yeah, I'm sure we all have. Sure. Well, this has been great. Ted, Chuck, great to share this with you.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's wonderful.
I hope people that are watching it enjoyed it. I did.
Yeah. I mean, to me, you know, we have to figure out how the human species navigates this threshold. It's got to be all of it. I mean, we have to have every discipline, every individual, every way of seeing it engaged. And if those ways need to be changed, well, they will have to be changed. Yeah. They will change. So exciting stuff. I want to put this up on screen. Not that one, actually, the other one, the final slide. There we go. That final slide.
We're in the infancy of her proposal,
We do to
you know,
support robust
Yes.
of multidisciplinary engagement. You know, she's an example. Smart people are coming up out of the woodwork.
I think that forum of scientists to convene to ask to formulate the right questions, that's not a long-term, that's a nearer term kind of process. And we can help make that happen.
Definitely. Yeah. I know Chuck, speaking from the Human Institute, both of us were very much focused on helping multiple disciplines, multiple domains of human activity and knowledge respond, a framework for our human response to the existence of NHI and our engagement with NHI at the level of everything from academia and education, science and technology, governance, even religion and spirituality. It's a whole of humanity effort.
Policy, first responders, all of this, you know, how do we distill what Julia's talking about down to a police officer on the street?
Right.
You know, or how do we develop a public policy? We have these state-sponsored UAP programs starting to rise up out of here. I expect that there's going to be a lot of circling the nest before they take off in any particular track, because it's going to take that long for them to find a perspective that works. And they may fail. They may not be able to keep going and keep their funding long enough to find a track, you know, to research and work on. I saw this in my work with the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, that they weren't really ready to find a research arc and exploit it. And there's a lot of very smart people there, but they just weren't really ready to do that. So it's a big subject, and I think like we said, it starts with the questions. It starts with what should we be asking, and she's very perceptive in that regard.
Boys, let's end this, or we could just go forever. I'm hungry.
Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Whether it's morning, evening, or afternoon, it's been a pleasure. The series will continue. We'll be engaging more of the best minds in multiple disciplines of scientific thought and research in investigating what this intelligence is, how it's interacting with us, and now today, from what we are learning, what our experience of it is, and how that can be a conduit or a portal to understanding the potential reality of a non-human intelligence. So thank you so much. I highly encourage you to like and subscribe and share, get on the email list so you get early updates, as well as post-lecture summaries and other good things to keep your mind spinning on this. And if you are interested in speaking at the series or know someone who might be, please encourage them, or do so yourself. Submit an abstract for the team to review, and we will be in touch. So with that, I'll say thank you so much for being with us in the series, and we'll see you next time.